Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, January 19th, 2022 Garrison Board of Education regular business meeting. Justy, will you call the meeting to order and call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apicello. Here. David Gilbert.
Here.
Madeline Julian.
Here.
Courtney McCarthy.
Excused.
Kent Schott.
Here.
Matthew Spicer.
Here.
Sarah Tormey.
Here. All right. Now do the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Next up, I have agenda changes and approval. Do I have any suggested or proposed changes to this evening's agenda? All right. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Now we will move on to our board communications and presentations. This evening we begin with a GUFS branding and communications plan update. With Mr. Sammartano. Come on up to a beautiful podium. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. All right, so tonight I am very excited to share with the board and the community the products of our branding project, which we have been working on for several months now. And so I'm just going to kind of run through the process so you can see where we've been and how we arrived at today, and towards the end we'll see the fruits of our labors. So as you know, earlier in the year we set out with the goal of rebranding our district in terms of the visual assets such as logo and typography and so forth to create a more cohesive look for our district that will bring us into the future. Some of the objectives. Yeah. We're good? All right. So just to recap some of the objectives of the branding process, our goal was to modernize the district's public identity. We want to communicate our values and our objectives going into the future, and as those values and objectives evolve over the years. We want to develop a deeper community connection, and we of course want to continue to attract talent and resources to our district. Before we look at the process, let's just revisit the existing branding. As you've seen, and we've talked about this before, this was the existing logo, which served us very well for many, many years. And we've been able to incorporate this into a lot of our communications, including our district website as it is now, newsletters, letterhead, etc. We set forth on this process, and it was a very kind of long, exhaustive process to ensure that the result was of the highest quality and would really meet our objectives. The process began with the recruitment and interviewing of literally dozens of designers from all around the world. I've talked to many of them and kind of assessed their portfolios and tried to find one that would align well with our goals and objectives. We completed the creation of an extensive brief, which is essentially a document sharing all of the information we can about our district, what we value, what our objectives are, as well as lots of things like photos from the grounds and the community to try and communicate what we want to capture within our branding. Ultimately, we selected a designer, we negotiated cost and timeline, and dove right into the process. The process was an ongoing process, lasted for quite some time, in which we went through multiple rounds of ideation, iterations of designs with small tweaks, big tweaks, and all sorts of changes before landing on a final branding design. The brief, I think it's important to share some of the things that I shared with the designer to guide him through the process. So the brief really focused on some of these things, which are directly related to our newly created vision of the graduate, as well as the work we're doing in the strategic coherence planning process. We really want to capture and focus on our sense of community, our emphasis on sustainability, nature, and the environment, our drive for creating curious and innovative and empathetic students with a focus on character and creativity. And so as a result, we went through this long iterative process. And I'd kind of like to just take a few moments and walk you through the process by showing you some of the different designs that we looked at, considered, and tweaked, because I think it'll help you understand where we ultimately landed. So one of the first designs we received, and I'll go fairly quickly here because there were quite a few of them, was this, which was based off of, I don't know if you've noticed, the old wooden sign out in front of the building was the basis for this design, which we liked, but we didn't feel it really captured our spirit. So we moved on from that into this design, which we also liked. It captured our focus on nature and the environment, but not much more. So we quickly moved beyond that design. Then we landed in this design, which we thought was an interesting approach, not so much because of its visual appeal. However, the rationale that came with it was really appealing to us. The designer communicated that he felt like this sprouting leaf represented the growth and the nurturing of the children as they pass through our halls and through our school. And out of that growth emerges a spark of innovation and curiosity. And so we really enjoyed that sentiment and liked that and wanted to build upon that. So in our first round, we focused on this and wanted to continue along this road. So we went back to our designer and had lots of conversations, and were given a new round of ideas. This was one of them, which we rejected. And around this point, we really came back to the physical setting of the school. As you know, we've been working a lot with students in the forest this year, and it's one of our longer-term goals to get students out in the woods and really soaking in the wonderful nature that's around us. And we keep going back to this beautiful view that we have from the south redoubt atop the school forest. This is actually the view from up there. You can see West Point there. And we decided at this point that we really felt the river captured kind of the feel that we wanted to incorporate within our branding. And so we went back to the designer and asked him to consider exploring whether or not it would be possible to incorporate the river and the mountains into the design. And so we continued along the process. And this was another iteration, and you'll see more and more. And you can see it was quite a back and forth. We brought some color in and went through the whole design process until we arrived at this design, which we found very compelling. But we did feel like it needed some additional tweaking before landing on ultimately the final design. And so this is the new branding, the new logo for the Garrison School and the Garrison Union Free School District. So we're very excited about it. We feel it really captures our focus on nature and the environment. You can see the subtle leaf element in the bottom right corner, which again alludes to our focus on sustainability and the environment, and the birds flying off into the future, as it were. And so we landed on this design, and we worked with our designer to create a full branding guideline that includes multiple versions of the logo, both for the school as well as the district, in color versions, vertical, horizontal, single color versions. And so we ended up with a really wonderful collection that we're really proud of. Along with the process, we ended up, it's much more than just the logo mark. We also designed an entirely new color palette, which we're going to be working off of, which you'll see incorporated here, some of the colors. Incorporated within the physical building as we work through some of our construction process, as well as our forthcoming revised website and letterhead and hoodies and all sorts of fun things as we go forward that's going to reflect the new brand. So we're very excited about that. One other piece I want to talk about is the typography. So the font face that was chosen, and we did go through quite a selection of different choices, and we landed on a typeface called Lexend. And while we like the visual appearance of the font, we feel it's casual but refined and modern, and it fits our logo very well. It matches well with the mark. There's another reason we chose it. Lexend was a font, it's what's called a variable font, and it was scientifically developed over the course of nearly 20 years to be one of the most legible fonts ever created. And there's all sorts of data to support this, and you can see it actually has been proven to increase reading rates and legibility just simply by changing the font face. And so it has a really interesting story behind it, and so we're excited to be able to use it not only within the logo, but this will be our font that we use for our communications to the district going forward. So we're very excited with where we landed with the new branding, and we're going to see it more and more as we roll it out over the course of the next 4 to 5 months. And it is going to be a bit of a process to roll it out because, like I said, we're working on a redesign of the website, and that should be happening in the coming months. And then we're going to gradually be incorporating it into letterhead and all of the other communications. There's one last thing that we want to address, which is, of course, the cougar. We don't want to leave out the cougar. There he is. We want to make sure we reflect him. So we decided along the way that it was important to have a coordinating, I'm calling it an athletics logo, though it's not strictly for the athletics. We want to retain the cougar as our mascot, and we want it to be represented within our branding as well. So we worked with our designer to continue on and create a coordinating cougar logo. And I won't go through the whole process, but we have gone through a similar design process with multiple iterations and are getting close, not finalized, but getting close to some final designs. And these are all using the same color palette, the same typography, similar lines and so forth to coordinate with our main district logo. And we will be able to use these on uniforms and throughout the building and for various other things going forward. And so we're really quite happy with the results of the project, and we're really excited to incorporate them going forward. And so that brings us to the next steps, which I've already alluded to. Right now, we're actively developing and designing the new website, which will reflect all of this branding. We are also working on rolling out our new communications platform, which will also reflect this branding. And then we're also going to be working internally with staff and faculty to communicate the best ways to incorporate this as we communicate outside the district with the community to make sure that people are as consistent as possible using the right typeface and colors and so forth. We were able to walk away, and I'll show you really briefly, if I can, with a full district brand guide, and you might recall, let me just drag this over here. You might recall that at one of my previous presentations where we talked about this. I can't find my mouse. No, I can't pull it up right now, my apologies. We ended up with this full branding guideline, which gives all of the specs around sizing and spacing and the color palette and what colors to use when and so forth. It's this extensive packet which will kind of guide us going forward. And so that's the result of the branding project, and like I said, we're really excited to move forward with it. If anyone has any questions or comments, we're happy to talk about them now.
I'll jump in with a thank you for, first of all, going through this process, soliciting the input. I know you even got Mr. Beckley's input for the cougar design, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness in reaching out and making sure that all opinions were included. Does anyone else have any thoughts on our new logo, the process?
I think that this is great. I love seeing it. I like having it already in the little email, showing up. I think it does a good job of capturing it and actually seeing like the process you went through. And then that you landed on this one, makes even more sense now. And so I just have one question, which is the website redesign. Are you doing that? Or are you who's doing it, and what is that like?
So many schools will outsource web development and design to these large companies. And, as I think we briefly discussed at one of the previous meetings, I'm not sure, but one of the problems with that is you end up with a very canned feeling site that looks like every other site. And so being that we are a smaller district and we have the ability, we're actually going to build the site internally. It's going to be a fully functioned site, but we'll have really granular control over every little bit of it. We'll be able to make changes really quickly and easily and really incorporate the branding exactly how we want. So that's the plan right now, and we're actively working on that at the moment. And, the hope, like I said, the hope is to have a new website up and running within months. I don't want to promise anything. Within months. That's certainly before the end of the school year, yeah.
Great.
Madeline, you gotta come to a microphone.
Oh, yes.
Very far back, come on.
Thank you for the process and showing us the process, the final design. I did notice that it went out on last week's newsletter, and I was wondering if the community or the parents or if they had any input, if anyone noticed, any comments?
We didn't Here, I didn't get any feedback in particular about it. I think it may have somewhat flown under the radar. The truth be told, we wanted to formally share it with the community through this meeting. I think that may have gone out a little earlier than expected, but I think it would be a nice thing to share with the community, whether via an email or something like that, just a little bit of the story, so they can see the background and they know what they're seeing. But I haven't heard any specific feedback yet.
And it's called the Garrison. So my question is, there is another the Garrison here in Garrison. I think is it a rest?
Yeah.
How did you end up on the Garrison instead of the Garrison School, or?
Well, so if we look back, we have multiple versions. From the beginning, let me just jump back to the different iterations here. So from the beginning, I was proceeding with the notion that we were referring to this as the Garrison School and the Garrison Union Free School District. And so that was the basis for it. The designer made the decision to lay things out the way you see it, but you'll see none of them say just the Garrison. It's either the Garrison School or the Garrison Union Free School District. We did have a conversation about that potential confusion, but we decided to proceed with this because we felt it was the most visually appealing way of laying it out. We are actively having conversations about which version to use where on the new website, the website being the most visible platform where this will be seen. And we're going to try and make sure we avoid any confusion, even if it does mean making some tweaks to the layout of the text. But yeah, that is a concern we considered.
Not that it might matter, but every time I hear about the school, everyone calls it the Garrison School. No one calls it the Garrison Union Free School District.
I just want to make sure that we're clear for like when we have business matters too, that they know it's a district homepage. For if they're referring to tax documents or anything like that, that there's a place to go for that. That's not related to the school.
Yeah, so we're exploring, we were actually just talking about this today on the website. We're exploring different options, but pages that are pertinent to the district as a whole will likely have the Union Free School District branding, and then pages that are more specific to the building and the teaching and learning that happens will have the Garrison School version. So that's one way of going, but we're definitely aware of that and talking about it.
David?
Mike, I think it's great. I really do. I think that I really appreciate the time and the effort and the intelligence that you put into this. I just hope that Elon Musk doesn't see it and come along and steal you. I was very struck by that view of the Hudson. That's a beautiful picture. I mean, if there's some way to integrate that on, I don't know what, on a website or whatever, it's just a gorgeous picture. It really does.
Yeah, so we're excited about that as well. And part of the website project will be capturing some new photography of both the building and the immediate grounds, but also up in the forest and this view in particular. And we actually have plans to capture it throughout the year. So we have seasonal photos that we can reflect on the website. So when you visit the new website in the winter, you'll have the snowy view of the Hudson. And when you visit the website in the spring, you'll have the lush green view and things like that. So yeah, we're trying to be mindful of that. I mean, it's $1 million view right there, yeah.
I really feel like the work you put into this and what you've produced is just so beyond the kind of mediocrity that you sometimes get with these sort of things. I mean, it shows a standard of very high standard of.
It's been a fun collaboration. We've enjoyed the process, definitely.
Can I also just say, you keep saying it took, you've been working on it for so long, but I think that this is like crazily quick compared, when you started. So this is really even more impressive that you spent so much time on it and got it through so quickly.
Well, thank you. Like I said, it was an exciting project, and we're most excited about the implications for the future and how this can help us build community and grow going forward. So.
Matt?
I don't want to use up time repeating everything, but I'll just say I agree with everything that was said, so thank you.
Okay. And the new website will go to the newly formed Communications Task Force next step. Is that correct? We'll start there.
Sorry, can you say it again? I didn't hear.
The newly formed Communications group will start seeing previews. David, that's your group, of the website soon. So.
Yes, we're working on that now. We'll do a quick review of the website and then start building it out. Absolutely.
And to celebrate the new branding, each one of our board members has a water bottle with the new brand on it, and we hope you enjoy it.
But nothing more spirited than water.
Yes.
Well, we felt the water bottle was appropriate as we're focused on eliminating plastic bottles in the building and reducing our waste, so reusable water bottle is a good tool.
Great. All right, any further comment on the new brand or communications plan update as presented? Okay, we're going to move on then to the Learning Commons design presentation. Mike, you're welcome to stay at the podium.
I can stay there. All right, from one fun topic to another, let me just bring this up. So we're going to shift our attention to, like I said, another exciting project that we are in the midst of working on, which is the redesign of the former library space in the building. So just to give a little background, as part of the capital project, the former library has been essentially completely gutted out. The former computer lab space was removed, and we've been left with a large blank box, essentially. There's been a little bump out for a new server room where our server equipment is, but other than that, it's largely in a large empty box. And so for much of the year, we've been working on trying to design and come up with our objectives for the use of that space going forward. And we've been working on creating a design and finalizing design and are, in the process, and we hope to have a final completed space at some point during next school year, hopefully earlier rather than later. So we just wanted to take a little bit of time and share with you some of the progress and some of the ideas that we're looking at and how we would like to implement them. So as you know, and it's a little hard to see, I apologize, is a floor plan of the building. And right smack in the center of our building is this wonderful, long, narrow space. It looks out onto one of our courtyards with walls of windows, and it really is a beautiful space with a tremendous amount of potential. If you go in there now, it's pretty interesting because you can see what was the old gymnasium floor, which was buried by linoleum or whatever the flooring was for many, many years, and that's exposed now. And you can start to see the bones of the place, which is exciting as we've gone to try and design it. So when we set out to come up with a plan for this space, we considered things that we wanted to see and things that we didn't want to see. And what we've landed on is that we don't want this space to be a quiet, orderly space filled with rows of shelves, computer stations, and to be a static and sterile space, as sadly many libraries are traditionally. What we're looking for is a flexible space, something that is dynamic, that can change to our needs, that's colorful, inspiring, modern, innovative, comfortable for students, a place where people want to go and talk and collaborate and work together to solve problems, whether it's individuals, small groups, or even large groups. We want this space to ultimately be not just the hub of the building, but potentially the hub of the community. We envision it being used throughout the school day, but also in the evening for all sorts of events from the community, whether it be speakers or fundraisers, whatever it may be. And so to give you a sense of some of our ideas, as I zoom back in on the floor plan, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner there, that little bump out, that is the new server room. So we did lose a little bit of the footprint of the space to that. But we feel like we're going to try and work off of that bump out and use it as kind of a feature. And so at some point along the line, we decided that it would benefit us to have a raised area, some sort of stage in the space. And so we landed on this space right here. And the stage will be used for everything from, as we said, speakers who come in to give presentations, obviously small and large group work, but then also potentially performances from within our music program and our theater program going forward. Because there are going to be scenarios where we're going to have smaller performances that don't necessarily require a big space like the space we're in right now. We hope to have board meetings in this beautiful space when it's completed, and so forth. And so we are planning for this large curved stage that's going to have a step along the front that can serve both as a way of getting up on the stage, but also as potential seating for our younger students, and a flexible stage. And when it's not in use as a stage, we are going to add some comfortable furniture to the top of the stage so it can be used all the time. Behind the stage, we're excited about having you can see it represented by blue there, a very large very modern projection system so that we can use this space for really impactful presentations, movie nights, all sorts of different things, along with a state-of-the-art sound system that will be usable for all sorts of events. The back space of the library, shown here, this is where, if you know the space, the ceiling height drops way down. It's only about 9 feet high, if that. It might even be less than 9 feet high in this area. The rest of the space has these cavernous, very high ceilings, and then it drops down. And so we felt from the beginning that this lends itself to being a somewhat sectioned off area, not necessarily closed off with walls, but defined by furnishings and dividers so that it can be used as a more dedicated instructional space. We envision this being used by classes who come in with their teachers, but also for things like faculty meetings and professional development sessions and so forth. So we're going to outfit that with all sorts of flexible furniture, whiteboard tables, comfortable seating, different height tables, some storage, and then there will be another large display either on the left side or the right side. We haven't decided yet. So that can be its own dedicated space. The other key element in the space that we're really excited about is adding what's called a learning pod. So unfortunately, we don't really have the flexibility to build a lot of interior walls, nor do we want to build interior walls. We want to preserve this open feeling, but we do want to have spaces that allow for smaller, more intimate conversations and collaboration, potentially things like audio and video recording in a soundproof area, and small group meeting areas and so forth. And so we landed on the idea of bringing in a freestanding pod, as it were, which are all the rage in a lot of startups and businesses now, where you have these large open floor plan offices, but you need the ability to go into a quiet space to focus or have a conversation. So we're exploring that, and it will likely land somewhere in this area, though we're still kind of navigating the floor plan. But we're very excited about that component. And largely we land on that because some of the limitations of how the HVAC is configured in there prevent us from putting up any more permanent walls. And then the final piece is we are going to have another projection, or not projection, but another display on this front wall on the bottom. So you'll see we have outfitted technology all over the space for maximum flexibility. So you could actually have 3 groups in here doing small group instruction with a display, or if we have one large event, we can have the same slides, video, whatever, displayed on all of these displays, and they're all synced together with a top-of-the-line sound system. And so we have spent quite some time now looking at inspiration. We've visited other schools to see their work and to try and come up with a plan for our own building. Here are some of the photos just for inspiration, things that we've been looking at and we've tried to incorporate in some form or another. I'm going through them quickly because they're somewhat generic photos that show different furniture and so forth. The pod is out. You'll see the pod in a moment. So we're working with several different designers right now, and we're exploring different floor plan options, and we have a whole bunch of them. This was an early version, which we didn't like because it was too traditional classroom focused. And I know I'm going through these quickly. We can share these in more detail, but this was another iteration which is more flexible, and you can see it's all sorts of interesting furniture throughout the space to really meet the needs of anyone who comes into the space. And of course, at the end of the day, it's all totally flexible. So if we need to have a big event, everything can easily be moved off to the sides of the room to give us a large open space, whether it be a dance or a presentation, whatever it may be. And so here are some renderings. Let me just say these are not final designs at all. These are just some of the renderings we've gotten during the process. So this is kind of an above view. And you can see the stage there. This is the floor level view. Again, this is not final. These are not the selections. It's just to give you a sense. And you can see we're exploring different options to kind of make it, even though it's this large, high-ceilinged room, we're exploring different options with acoustic panels to bring the ceiling down and to dampen potential noise and to define spaces. You can see one of the large screens there. You see these room dividers and all this comfortable and flexible furniture. So it's been a really exciting process. Here are some of the products. Here's some more of those architectural ceiling tiles. These are some more products. I was just emailed these from a designer not a half an hour ago. We're looking at things like built-in banquettes to kind of give a more, almost like a diner feel. Here is an example of some of the pods, not necessarily where we're going to end up, but it gives you a sense. It's essentially a little glass room dropped into a space. And many of them are soundproof, and they have their own ventilation units, their own electric built into them. So they will function really well for us. So there are models that are mobile. They're fairly large, so it's not something we would be moving frequently, which is partially why we're looking at against that wall as a placement, because we don't want to have to move it too frequently. But if we ever need to, if we need to replace carpeting down the road or something like that, it can be disassembled, it can be slid over. Just to give you a sense of some of the furnishings we're looking at, there's all sorts of interesting, comfortable furniture that will appeal to all grade levels. So if we have our kindergartners and our first graders in there, they're going to be just as excited as our eighth graders and, of course, our adults. Now, what about cost? So we have set a very rough preliminary budget for the project that falls into three main categories. So we're looking at the $120,000 to $130,000 budget for all of the furnishings, and that's going to include chairs, tables, wall dividers, etc., acoustical panels, anything that you saw in the space would fall into that budget. We're looking at a rather large technology budget because we want to kind of future-proof this space. We want to do this once and have it meet our needs for a long period of time. Additionally, it is a bright space, having a whole wall of windows, so we have to get a certain caliber of screen and projection to make it effective in there. And then it also acoustically is a somewhat challenging space with the high ceiling and the low ceiling. So we're trying to take all of these things into mind as we design the technology. So we're looking at a $60,000 to $70,000 technology budget for this space. And then the pod itself, there are many, many versions that are as inexpensive as $15,000 up to $30,000 to $40,000 or beyond. So we're working on a budget of $20,000 to $30,000 for that. Again, these are all very loose numbers that are evolving, but these are what we are targeting. As far as funding this space, we have a preliminary plan for how we hope to fund it, which has two main components. And one, and certainly Carl and Joe can speak to this more, one will be this rebate that we're expecting from the New York State Clean Heat Program, which is related to the installation of our new HVAC system. And that's $120,000 plus right there. And so that on its own can essentially be earmarked to furnish the entire space. And then we're very excited to be partnering with GSEF. They're very generous in donating a chunk of money to help us put towards the learning pod and the technology. And then we will combine some district funds along with that to meet any additional needs. And so this is our preliminary plan going forward. And as far as the timeline goes, we are actively continuing to design the space and hoping to land on a somewhat final design in the coming weeks to months. And then hope to, as the construction wraps up in the summer, move into a design and furnishings phase, get the technology installed, and targeting an opening in the fall. Hopefully at the beginning of school, but perhaps a little bit later, depending on funding sources and so forth. And so that is our plan. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before we move to questions, I just want to say thank you very much for the time and energy you, Carl, and Joe have put into this. I think it's very exciting. One of our goals this evening as a board is to come to a consensus on whether we wish to set aside the potential rebate money for this purpose. So keep that in mind as we move forward with our conversation. All right, do I have any questions, comments, thoughts? David, go ahead.
I want to ask you about the Clean Heat Program rebate. Is that a done deal?
I'm going to defer that to Carl and Joe because they know more details than I do.
I think it is, the design has been reviewed by the representatives from the program in that it meets all the criteria. So the only thing that's left to be done is after everything gets installed and commissioned, they have to just verify that we did all the things on the plan. And so it's a pretty safe bet that we will get that green. Yes.
And what is it that makes it energy efficient?
It is it's a heating and cooling program that is able to modulate the variable refrigerant flow that it's a part of the design is more efficient in that you use exactly the amount of energy that you need in order to get the heating and cooling to where it's required. So unlike where you have, for example, a steam boiler where you either have too much heat energy or you have not enough, it's very easy to modulate to get exactly what you need. So that's what makes it more energy efficient. You're going to be using more electric, but you're not going to be using any fossil fuels that are from here. There may be fossil fuels as a part of your electric generation, depending upon what the utility is using, but you're not using any here.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Just curious if we didn't. So I just did a renovation and I knew about this rebate before I started. Were we unaware of this and did we not put this anywhere else in the budget?
So the question you're asking is, have we planned
Like the 100,
to use?
yeah.
We have not planned to use the rebate money anywhere else. We also did not budget at the initial part of the, when we were putting forth the capital project for furniture in this space.
So we had a blank, just an empty space?
Yes.
Okay. That was my other question. So. And my other question is just future-proofing. That's a great concept. Is that really possible? I mean, it's just, I guess that would be my only question with the technology is future-proofing versus just being smart about what you're buying and thinking about future-proofing as in we will probably replace this in 10 years.
Well, as you know, there's no such thing as future-proofing when it comes to technology, of course, because we have no idea what's coming and everything will continue to evolve. I think our goal was to get the equipment that will best serve the space and the nuance of the space, but also give us the longest life possible. We explored a lot of options. Originally, Carl and I were very excited about doing the idea of a video wall rather than projection for the large screen. Video walls are essentially an array of TV screens. We saw them at one of the districts we visited, and they're wonderful, but cost prohibitive, and they have other challenges. So we're working within some budget guidelines, but also trying to get the best we can that will last us as long as we can. So this particular projector, which is the centerpiece of the space, I forget the exact number of lifetime hours, but it will far outlive our use of it. So we're hoping this will last us quite some time and we'll be performing well for a long time.
Do you have any idea of what GSEF might be willing to contribute to this?
Numbers-wise? Yeah, Carl.
We've had a few conversations. They really don't have an exact number, and Lauren Veneris is here. She's been part of the discussion, and I do think the idea would be that in the spring, with their annual fundraiser, that they would, specifically fundraise for this purpose. And what we haven't decided yet, Ken, would be, do we take, or does GSEF fund a portion of this? There is, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, I think there's about 5,000 GSEF has in an account already earmarked for a stage. So they've already offered to donate that money for us to use with that stage concept that Mike showed you. But then in addition, potentially taking the technology or even maybe the pod, maybe a piece of it, or maybe it's just a general partnership with district funds and GSEF funds to complete the entire interior design. So still early in the discussion process, but I think the idea is to fundraise in the spring.
Okay. And the stage is envisioned for more like speakers versus like a theater and that kind of thing? Because I know aren't we investing in this stage as well, right, as part of the renovation?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Here we're doing what, new dimmer racks are going in for lighting, and then there's
sound system.
some a new sound system and things like that for larger performances on this stage as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification, and thanks for the hard work in putting this together. It looks like a great space. Obviously, it would be a lot more interesting to have a board meeting there than here, so benefit all of us as well, so thank you.
Just one other thing, if I may add, and Mike, please join me in this. Another thing that we considered with this plan is that we've made a big investment. It actually started with GSEF, but there's been a big investment in classroom libraries. And each one of our every grade level, each teacher has a classroom library of somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 novels inside the classroom. So in shifting to a balanced literacy program where we have various leveled reading materials, a variety of genres within the classrooms, and we can continue to enhance and support and replenish those books and add new selections. Knowing that, we thought this space would be better used, again, not to be redundant, but not as a traditional library that we all kind of grew up with, but a more of a 21st century, a space that there's a lot of collaboration. But also, Mike and I have been in touch with Desmond Fish Library, and they are more than willing to send us book collections that could go on display. For example, if a teacher was doing a research project, or during Women's History Month, or whatever it may be, they're more than happy to work with us and ship over a collection that we could display. So it's not that there would be no books. We do envision some, but of course it is a major shift in thinking from a traditional library to now a learning commons.
That the library discussion with Desmond Fish triggers something. Was there a discussion at some point about a path from the school to the library and more, maybe more trips for the easier access for the children to go to the library from here? Maybe that was years ago, or is that familiar to anyone?
I don't know if any of our board members are more familiar with it. My understanding is there still is, there's some community members advocating for a trail, walking and I think even potentially biking. But I don't know where they are as far as making that progress. Right now, we do send our students to Desmond Fish. They do come on site, but we do use a shuttle bus to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you.
Madeline, you have a question?
Yes, so this is great news. Very exciting. So I have two questions. One, were the teachers involved in the planning and the need of the space? Can you give us an example of how will this help the instructional piece of a typical day? That's what I'm having a little bit of trouble, because it's a multi-purpose space, right? We can do a lot of things, but can you give me an example of how it would help?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, teacher feedback is important. I did share a brief survey with teachers earlier on just to get some quick feedback as to things they would like to see. That was early in the process, as well as many, many conversations face-to-face. It's one of the benefits of a smaller faculty. I can actually go have conversations with everyone to get feedback. And one of the overwhelming things was the use of the low ceiling area in the back as a PD meeting, almost not a classroom space, but a flexible instructional space rather than just a room with shelves of books. So everyone seemed to be on the same page with that, and that was kind of one of our starting points. People have been very excited about the idea of the stage and the projection this year alone, we've had, I'm guessing, dozens of speakers either come in live or via Zoom, and we've had 2 or more grade levels together to interact with that speaker. And so providing a really good flexible space, which we don't really have in the building otherwise, has been something that has been asked for. So I think we're really trying to focus on that. As far as teachers' use on a day-to-day basis, I think it's going to vary tremendously. I can certainly see a lot of our middle schoolers in here working on independent projects where teachers just come down and students are able to go find a comfortable spot and work independently or work in small groups to get them out of the classroom to a place that more fosters conversation and interaction amongst students. To, like I said, multiple larger groups of classes coming together to do work all together. So it's really going to run the gamut, but certainly teacher feedback has been important from day one, and that has kind of helped get us to some of the plans that we're looking at now.
And Mike, I would just add to that, to respond to Madeline's question, performing arts department, and they are fairly new, but they come with a tremendous amount of experience. We looked at the stage versus a smaller stage in the Learning Commons. I think also Kent touched on this earlier, but a more intimate space for a chorus performance or a small theater performance. You know, in this gymnasium, it's beautiful, but it's big, and you would feel a bit lost. So they were very excited. They thought it would be a much better venue for a lot of the future performances that we're planning. It's not that we would not use this space and this stage, but these would be bigger productions here. We do envision a lot of smaller productions, inviting parents in, and we just think it would be great. So we also debated, you know, location of the stage, and we all reached consensus of the location that Mike did show on the rendering.
And just one other point, just to clarify, I mean, I think a lot of people visualize a lot of different things when they hear the word stage. We're talking about 15 inches high, I believe, so we're not talking about a stage like the one in here, a big, large, overwhelming stage. It's essentially a raised area that will not only serve as a performance space, but also add some visual interest to an otherwise large rectangular room. So that was part of the thought as well. Like I mentioned in our plans, we fully envision having interesting soft furniture and things on this stage when it's not being used as a stage, so that it can be used as a collaborative space or reading space, whatever it may be. So that's the plan.
So let's say you wanted to screen a film
Sure.
for an audience of maybe 100 people. Would you do it in the library? Would it work that way?
That's the plan. Yeah, that's the thought. All the furniture we're looking at is on wheels, can be moved around, rearranged easily. In fact, the chairs we were just sourcing, I was just looking at tonight, they're meant to be used in a space like this where they come with a specialized dolly and they can be stacked and moved around very easily. And so, yeah, absolutely. We want it to be flexible for basically any need.
So this rebate is from the Clean Heat program. Is there a way that we can actually use this to make a well-sustainable space, meaning that the finishes, the furniture, the requirement from the procurement requirement, we're conscious of embodied carbon, and this is something that right now every single furniture company is working on right now if they want to stay in business, but the owners have to make the request. So can you ask and also ask them to provide a tracking device of embodied carbon and make sure that the finishes have low VOCs, right? We don't want all of that off-gassing in the space. We want a healthy space for the staff and the students. And I think that will go a long way.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you. We definitely will.
Yeah, so we're still in the design phase, and then comes the selection phase, and I agree 100%. I think that's an important thing to consider. I would also, like we haven't spoken this today, I would love to see a green wall with plants on the wall, something really interesting like that to kind of bring nature in and you know, encourage that. I think it's a...
And it doesn't have to be that fancy. Even the chair, the specs of the chair, right? As they're designing it, we got to let them know of our priority when it comes to the specification before they go out to look at different manufacturers. Because there are some manufacturers, same price range, same quality, that provide better sustainable products with a lower carbon footprint than other. So if we are able to select that, that would be good.
Definitely do that, yes.
Jocelyn and Matt, go ahead.
My question was likewise about using a rebate for doing something kind of sustainable and ensuring that some of that rebate goes towards similarly minded, use. So I appreciate that, but I guess related to funding, have we used and applied for and allocated all of the ARPA and otherwise funding that's usually a one-time funding, or could any of that be used towards this? And then similarly, if this is going in over the summer or maybe into next year, can we put some of this into the budget proposal so that we don't have to maybe draw down too much, et cetera? I mean, I guess it will have to, because this doesn't equal what you're proposing, right? But I think that as someone who likes to advocate for a lot of the, carbon reducing projects that we have on board, it would be really hard to stomach putting all of the rebate into, technology, so to say, because there's been a lot of proposals from the community that are about things like we've talked about before, charging stations, EVs, things like that, that money could also be used for. So I'm hoping that we paint it so that it also looks like we're doing something like Madeline suggested, which is a really good idea. So more a comment than a question, really.
Joe and I just this afternoon finished working on the application for the American Rescue Plan funds. I'm going to turn it over to Joe to talk about the funding.
The American Rescue Plan funding you could use for this. We are looking at using the American Rescue Plan funding for some classroom furniture, for some of the things that we're required to do, which is to do after school and summer programming to address learning loss. That's a requirement. We have to do that, as well as we're looking at making investments to upgrade our food service infrastructure to be able to start a food service program next year, and to replace one of our pieces of equipment, our plow truck with a new one, because it's 14 years old, and we're looking at replacing that. So those are some of the things that we're looking at for those funds.
Okay. So so that ARPA funding is well spoken for, with these other projects so far.
I also think I was looking back as to how we came to a point where, we don't have money in the budget for the capital project for necessarily like the furniture itself. And David, you would have been on the board then, but I think going back through my memory of those presentations, when we were initially looking at the designs for the capital project, there were ideas of glass walls to divide the back area of the library and things like that, and it really came down to cost. We wanted to keep the project under a certain number, that under the 10 million mark, and we needed to do the roof. We needed to do the heating system, those very basic things that are harder to sell, for example, through GSEF and other fundraising ideas. So that's why some of these things were cut and set aside for later as well, just for reference as to how we ended up with a room with no furniture.
One of the other things that's associated with capital projects and things like building aid, unless you're building a new library, generally the renovations to libraries are not eligible for building aid. Although we don't get a large portion of building aid here, it's still something that helps to offset the cost. And typically that is a general rule that a renovation of an existing library is not aidable.
Matt, you had a question?
I have a question that I think a lot of people can answer, and I feel like I should know the answer, but do our older students currently, do they do a lot of homework in the building? And are there slots during which they do that work, like after school and before they go home? And are there study hall periods like during the day that they do that work?
I'm happy to take that one, Matt. The answer is yes. So at the middle school, we're on a 9-period day. There is one period that's designated as a flex period. So some students may go to music, some may go to academic intervention services, some may have a study hall, essentially, and where they could complete homework. We've had some mixed reviews on that. We've had parents ask us, well, gee, why does my child not have homework? And of course, the child is working diligently and getting it done on that period. But we are, and this is for a future presentation, but Allison Amig, myself, Mike Sammartano, and our guidance counselor, we've worked on changing the master schedule for next year. And one goal is to eliminate the study halls. So that will be going away. However, during lunch and recess, what we definitely plan to do with this space is make this one option for children. We'd like to give them choice. And part of middle school is having choice. So if they need physical activity, especially during the winter months, they could be here in the gymnasium, but others may want to read and relax, or get started on a homework assignment or a research project, or play a game of chess, for example. And then we envision this space as being that space where they can do that. Now, I don't know if that specifically.
Yeah, you read my mind. So I'm thinking that's an important part of the flexibility too. It feels like the less dazzling piece, but maybe critical, especially to certain students who like doing work in the building. And I don't know if there's students who end up in the building later after hours who could use this space too in the future. Talk about future proofing. That feels like a timeless use of space that's not technology related, but so yeah, that's great. That would be a concern about making sure the space was could be utilized for that purpose as well.
Yeah, after-school programs, we, because of the pandemic, we scaled back, but this would be the perfect location, right across from the main office and, nearby the main entrance, but we do envision after-school programs happening here as well, certainly.
I have just one question. When you went and toured other schools and looked at what they have in their equivalents to this proposed learning commons, what did you see that excited you, especially in terms of the technology? How are the students using it? Did you see stuff like that learning pod in action?
So we did actually. One of the main place we went was Chappaqua High School, who just finished a major capital project, and they're in the midst of the next phase of it right now. Their project involved the construction of an entire new building, which was a STEAM building, which was very impressive in itself. It has this beautiful tiered staircase seating area with this massive video wall. And I know that they have students who come in and they'll present as groups, and so picture this, 25-foot video wall, and you can have multiple groups presenting in the different quadrants at the same time, so you can have kids work side by side. And it's a really powerful instructional tool. So that really caught our eye. In I think they call it their Global Learning Commons, or something along those lines, which was essentially their library. It is complete, the entire perimeter is essentially pods. They're more permanent glassed off rooms with all sorts of interesting furniture, but I would say just about everyone was populated with students while we were there, whether it was individual students, pairs of students, or even small groups. Many of them had mounted smaller screens where a student could plug their laptop in and they can all see the work together and collaborate on it. And so that was one of the things that really jumped out at us. One of the interesting things, which we didn't even think about, was they apparently also use all of this glass as whiteboard surface. So the students are encouraged, as they're working through projects, to just get up, grab a whiteboard, and draw on the glass. And it serves as a wonderful whiteboard service. So you see this great collaboration happening all over the place. And it really just serves to encourage this collaboration. And so those are some of the things that popped out at us. That's actually where we got the original notion of exploring this pod, especially once we found out that a permanent glassed off space wasn't really an option for a variety of reasons. We were like, all right, well, let's see if we can bring something in that could kind of mimic that individual space. So that was one of the most exciting things that I think we saw.
Okay. Do I have further comments, questions? Jocelyn, you raised a point about using this money. So if we are looking to allocate this money, do we feel comfortable, or do we have a consensus of allocating the rebate towards the furniture purchase and the use of the space?
I'd love a little more. The number estimates were a little wide.
Okay.
Like 20, 30,000, 40,000 on each. So I'd love a little more information on what does this project look like at 230 versus what does it look like at 180. Mm-hmm. Also with the uncertainty of the GSEP number and the budget challenges that we're going to have as we head into next year, it would be good to have a little bit more information before we commit to the full price. Mm-hmm. That would be my opinion.
I would have one question. I think that's a good point. I do think the budget challenges next year with more students going into high school and coming into our building are going to be very real for our budget. In terms of the contingency budget on the project itself, I know we have some money there, and there are some concerns about, we'll find more asbestos, more things will continue to come up as the project goes on. If GSEF sets a goal of a certain point and perhaps doesn't make that, would there be room to use some of that contingency money later on? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, but it's hard to really really say how much there's going to be until we get right on top of summer, which really limits the ability to guarantee that there's going to be money available for a significant portion of this budget. So that's the challenge.
When do you, again, remind me when this is when you need to start outfitting the room? Like, ideally, we'd want it for September, right? But when would you have to put orders in for things so that it's the ideal?
Jocelyn, some of the designers that we're working with are telling us that, like everything else, supply chain issues, you hear that over and over, but there is a lot of truth to that, and their recommendation is if you want the furniture to be delivered in the summer, that we probably would need to place orders within a month or so. We think that's too soon. As Ken points out, I do think we need to get some firm numbers. My recommendation would be, if we have another 2 to 3 weeks, we can come back to the board with very specific numbers and potential things that we can wait on. So for example, the pod. The pod does not have to be installed by the fall. As much as it's I think a fantastic idea and would be utilized constantly. Maybe that is something, if we have a tight budget year, that it has to wait until the following September. So maybe we do this in stages. And we can break down all of those costs and give you specifics. So that would be my recommendation, Jocelyn. But the furniture, going back to your original question, if we can't make the decision in 5 or 6 weeks. So what we think is more realistic is getting into the budget process and then maybe placing an order around May. It may not arrive until September, maybe even October, but I do think that's okay. It may be a little disappointing when everyone arrives back in school. We would love it to be 100% complete, but keep in mind we will have brand new finished classrooms everywhere. So everyone will have a beautiful, bright, new classroom. So if we cut the ribbon on the Learning Commons, let's say in mid-October, I do think that is okay. So we may have to just, delay it and have a grand opening sometime in mid-fall.
I really do want to see the sustainable part of this. So when the cost is confirmed, if you can also confirm some of the information that, yes, it is feasible with just the furniture package, and to see what we can achieve, and also the low VOCs.
Absolutely. We can go right to the 2 designers we're working with are also dealing with the furniture, and so we can put that request in immediately and see what they come back with. I'm sure it won't be an issue. It potentially will impact the budget, but we'll have to,
It shouldn't impact the budget. If it does, yes. It should not impact the budget, and they should look not just on the actual material, but the embodied carbon calculations.
I really like calling it the Learning Commons. And Carl, your point about the individual classrooms, libraries, for me is like not a parenthetical, it's like a headline, because I think it's critical for the community's understanding, for GSEF's presentation, two things. One, this is not in opposition to a traditional idea of a library. I would sort of underplay that as part of the pitch, because I think there's a lot of people who love traditional libraries, myself included. This is complementary to libraries that already exist in the classrooms. So it's not an alternative to a library. It's also not really a new vision for a library. It's a learning commons, so it's got all this flexible space. It's a study space, but it's not really a library, which is a good thing because we have libraries. But I think that's like when that clicked into place for me tonight during the presentation is when I felt more positive, and I don't think I'm alone in that. So I feel like in our communication, we talked about the communication task force, in communication with GSEF, I think that's like a really important thing to make clear to people that we're not trying to reinvent libraries, that we have libraries, and that this is a new opportunity for a new space to offer something else to students. I don't know if that resonates with people. If not, maybe I'm in a minority of one, but for me,
I was asking about the Desmond Fish path and the relationship, because I think that's the emphasis here, is we have a beautiful, wonderful library that's a stone's throw from here that could be used as a resource that if there are people that are worried about losing the library, we have, like you said, we have a library there that's wonderful, that we use, that we have a good relationship with, that could backfill any gap that would occur by changing the focus of this room.
You know, it's interesting, before we even embarked on this process earlier in the fall, this was actually the first thing we did. Was I immediately reached out to Desmond Fish to see what that partnership could look like and what the opportunities are, because this was one of our main concerns, I think, from day one. And we've talked about it so much throughout that perhaps it was my error in leaving it out as part of this. I think you're right. It is the headline. This is not a replacement. We still have access to physical books all over the building, and that is absolutely a priority from an instructional perspective. So, absolutely.
So what I'm hearing, though, in terms of our board response is we would like to see a breakdown of exactly what the furniture is going to be, what is that cost, the specs of that furniture, and then we will look to allocate the money. And if we could, is it reasonable to look at mid-February, early March for that? Okay.
Yeah,
and
I
that'll
think
be
so.
as part, and then we'll be into the budget process, keeping in mind that our budget this year will be a tight budget. So in terms of the money in the budget for this, it might be less than minimal, which is why we're looking at the rebate. Does that sound about right? Okay. Does that help you guys?
It certainly does.
Okay.
Sarah, to play it safe, I think we have a February 2nd board meeting. The next meeting, I think, would be more realistic.
I think that I agree with that. Even the first one in March too, which also will start giving the finance committee some time to start looking at what we're looking at for next year. All right.
We'll get
Any
back to you.
other comments, thoughts, questions regarding?
just another thank you for both presentations and for all the work behind both. It's really
Absolutely.
wonderful to get to see all this.
Great.
And also, thank you to Lauren from GSF for being here. I'm really excited, I know we all are, for your spring event. I hope you'll give us more details on that so that we can continue to promote it and hopefully get us closer to our goal for our Learning Commons in whichever way you choose to participate. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little distracted by the sirens. Now, moving on, next up on our presentations, we have a follow-up on NYSSBA information, and this goes back to a previous discussion. So Madeline, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you just to give a little follow-up.
In December, we had an open discussion about the school shooting and what we can do as board members in terms of advocacy. So I reached out to NYSSBA. They confirmed that they are working on it. They have 2 resolutions that were passed back in 2018. They expire in 2023. But they also encouraged us to draft a resolution for this year. The 2 resolutions that they're working on now, one seems very generic, and then the other one seems very specific to a district. So maybe we can review and see if we do want to draft a resolution or if we do want to do some other type of advocacy work around gun safety. So I think opening it up to the rest of the board members to see if we should proceed with this.
You had some reaction, Madeline, to the existing laws on gun control. Do you want to talk about that? I'm thinking about the misdemeanor issue.
Yes, but that's very big picture. I don't know if we'll be able to do much about that, right? As a school board.
So let's just talk about what it is.
Sure.
There's a state law says that if you fail to restrict gun access to a minor, you're guilty of a misdemeanor. That seems crazy to me. I mean, that seems to me that based on what we know, that ought to be a felony. So we had some communication about this, and whether there's a way for us to, take some initiative in raising that question. Is it really a misdemeanor if you let your 14-year-old get access to a weapon? People may feel that that's appropriate. I don't know. I mean, I don't, but it certainly seems something worth raising.
Well, it seems like those are, like you're kind of bringing up, those are at two different levels. I'm interested in thinking about both levels. Regarding the resolution thing, which goes to NYSSBA and then all the representatives vote on it like you did recently. I mean, you're raising an interesting point, like why don't we maybe draft a couple other resolutions too about things that we care deeply about, if there is anything. But I think that's I wonder if there's any way to find out if other districts too are thinking of a resolution, or if you would advocate for one or the other of the resolutions that are out there, kind of tweaking it. But regarding the big picture stuff, weren't you guys going to draft a letter or something too?
Yes,
You and Matt?
we didn't forget.
Okay.
We had a conversation about how Madeline's email sort of answered some of the questions, and then we needed to have this conversation about what exactly we think we
Right.
are capable of and what we actually want.
So that's a state level law about the misdemeanor? State level, New York state level?
That's what, so,
I'm asking, is it state level, that law about it being a
State
misdemeanor?
law, yeah.
So is that something realistic that we can try, and that was, I guess, my point. I don't know how much we can advocate for it, write letters. I don't know as a school district how much we can do about that.
I honestly, I do think that using NYSSBA and the power of its advocacy is our best route forward. Otherwise, we are committing a lot of our time and energy that could be spent on other things specifically related to our district, on advocating for something when we are just one small district, which is why NYSSBA is there and why we're members of it. So I think looking at the two resolutions they currently have, and what the language is, and then proposing a resolution. And then in that, I mean, you were the one who went to the meeting, so I think you would have a better sense. And I know it's been digital, so that might be really hard to hear, like, how the other districts respond to the resolutions when they're put forth. Are they able to say, discuss it, or is it just like an up and down vote? How does that work?
They're able to discuss it if they want to discuss it. And sometimes with some resolutions, some districts combine and submit a resolution together. So that's a great idea, Jocelyn, and maybe reaching out to other. Switches up.
Madeline, while that's being fixed, is there a NYSSBA listserv, like of the liaisons where you could, where you could say, anyone working on this, and see if anyone like pins you or pings you, whatever the lingo is?
try this.
Oh, yeah, that one works.
Yes, that works. Jocelyn, I can reach out to other districts and see if they're interested, and then we can do several resolutions, not just regarding gun safety, but anything else that we feel is important to bring up.
I think then what I'm hearing is maybe sharing out all of the two resolutions they currently have. And then if anyone has proposed language, perhaps send it to Madeline, and we can then bring it back here again for a public discussion once we have some exact language surrounding these and we've seen what is currently out there.
David, maybe we can have a resolution with the misdemeanor working
Yeah.
in, right? Very
Yeah.
specific
We should talk to Matt about that, too.
So let's look at that. Use that as our starting place then and go from there. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So you have those too. You can just email them out to everybody.
I will need help drafting the resolution, though.
Yeah.
Dusty can help us with this too. You could probably create a document that we can track and follow in Google Docs as well. Perhaps create in our board area on board docs. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we could also copy some of the language of the resolutions that you have, Madeline, almost as a template, and plug in if there's not something about the misdemeanor issue. If there's a standard language that they use, then we can sort of just plug it in as if it's a template.
Okay.
Erase misdemeanor and put in felony.
Right.
Strike it, yeah. Okay.
Those are the sorts of shortcuts I learned in my study halls.
But did you have a cool glass pod?
No, I had no pod.
It probably, if you'd been able to write on the walls, maybe it would have made a big change. Okay, thank you, Madeline, for reaching out to NYSSBA and for the work on this. I appreciate it. Okay, any other further comments before we wrap up NYSSBA? All right, moving on, we have public comment. Okay, public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns in accordance with policy 3220 of the Garrison Union Free School District. Any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. If you wish to speak, please state I don't have anyone signed up, but if you do wish to speak, we have this lovely podium. Just state your name, town of residence. That was my monologue. Anybody? Okay. Thank you very much. We are going to keep going then. We will have public comment again later in the meeting. So now we go on to committee reports. Planning Committee, Jocelyn.
Hi, thanks. So we met maybe 2 weeks ago now with our consultant, Jonathan Costa, and we're on phase 5 of the planning process. Which is aligning actions with strategic focus. I mean, I cannot believe how engaged the team is. They all, if you took a look at the shared document that we're all supposed to maybe, wordsmith and add comments, and there's so much added in there because people really took it seriously to try to create something that was really captured the process so far. And then I think now, though, I don't know, tell me if you think the same thing. I think now is actually probably the hardest phase, where we really try to put together the work plan of who is going to be doing what and when and things like that. So, I mean, we have another meeting in a couple weeks, Kent and David and Carl, with Jonathan, I believe, again, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think at that point we'll be really hammering out these 3 strategies that we're going to land on for this phase. If anyone who doesn't get to see these documents wants to see something, feel free to ask us to. Be happy to share the 44-page document with you.
We do have a presentation coming.
Yeah, he's coming next month or April. I can't remember.
I don't have the presentation calendar in front of
feel
me,
like
but
it's
I do
April.
believe it's coming soon. You're right.
It may be March, but.
March, yeah.
Maybe we'll get a consolidated version of your 44-page document at that point.
You definitely will. We have the full-length document which summarizes this process from start to finish.
Yeah.
It's exciting. We're, as Jocelyn explained, we're really getting into the specific strategies and the things we want to implement. I think the task right now is to talk about what systemic changes we need to make within the district to accomplish the goals. And we're excited to present publicly, but we are making great progress, and thank you to everybody who's involved.
Thank you. And I will note we did have a policy committee meeting. However, that update will come when Courtney returns to us. Okay. Any questions for Jocelyn regarding planning? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to accepting the minutes. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the minutes of the January 5th, 2022 regular meeting. May I have a motion, please? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Next up, we have acceptance of Treasurer's Report, December 2021. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the Treasurer's Report for December 2021 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for Joe this evening regarding the Treasurer's Report for December as presented? Anything you want to add, Joe, on this exciting report?
No, it's just a regular report of our financial accounts that are reviewed by myself and Dusty and the treasurer.
Okay. No questions or comments. I'm going to move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay, next up we have the consent agenda. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please? Okay. Before we move to a vote, Carl, are there some you want to speak to?
I'll just say there are 2 new per diem subs that we're adding to our sub list. This is a real challenging time for all districts. There is a real teacher shortage. The governor actually made mention of it, and the Commissioner of Education are talking about ways to incentivize people to go into the field. And of course, people, because of COVID and remote learning and covering classes being a higher demand, compared to past years, everyone is competing for substitutes. So we will continue to bring subs. They are enabling us to stay open and to support remote learning when needed, or to support in-person learning when a teacher is out. And these 2 seem qualified, and we're happy that they're willing to join us. Additionally, there is a recommendation to appoint an academic intervention services teacher from now through the end of the year. Now, this person, Caitlin Moreno, was approved as a substitute. You may recall at the very end of the summer, we did have a resignation from an ENL, academic intervention service teacher. We actually filled that position. We appointed someone who then resigned immediately afterwards to take another job. The substitute that we put in place has been doing a great job. We're really impressed with her. She has dual certification in childhood education and also in special education, I believe. She has 2 master's degrees and experience. She taught in New York City for 3 years. So she's doing a great job, and this would just be a term appointment from now through the end of June. So those are the recommendations. And then also, the third one is just a technical change. As we know, Mr. Michael Twardy is retiring. We did accept his retirement last month, but he was off by a day. So this is just an adjustment. Instead of officially retiring on February 28th, he's retiring on February 25th. So that is just a correction, basically.
Thank you, Carl. Do I have questions for Carl regarding the consent agenda? Madeline?
When is Michael Twardy's final actual last day at the school?
He has accumulated some vacation time that he has requested to use at the end. So right now, I believe his estimated last day, physically working, will be at the end of January. Next week. And
So I do want to express concern about the construction project, right? In overlap between Michael Twardy and.
Can you use David's?
Is there any way we can provide some more overlap, even if it's consulting. I am concerned about the loss of information. He was here from the very beginning on the construction. Anything, if anything will help. Is that something that we can do?
Let me say, we've been transitioning for several months. Michael Twardy does have a lot of knowledge and history with our facilities as well as transportation. But Joe Jimick has been meeting with Michael probably on a daily basis. And I think we're in a good place. All of us, Madeline, participate in the construction meetings regularly. Knowing Michael was approaching retirement, we made sure. So I think we're in a good place with the capital project, especially with our project manager on site, and Joe and I have been very involved. Also, we have other facility staff, one person who has really been taking a lead with transportation and another with facilities. And Michael has been very, very helpful in passing on his knowledge, his history of the building, of the transportation system. So that transitioning is happening. But Michael is also willing, and I think it's something maybe we will consider, but he did say he would be available a few days a week, that after he officially retires, if we did need him, we could appoint him almost like on a per diem or consultant basis, and he is willing to do that. So right now, I think we're in a good place, but Joe, if you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that summarizes where we are. So we have been using the opportunity over the last few weeks to be asking the clarifying questions and having the discussions about some of the things that are in process, some of the things that are of concern. And as Carl said, we've been very involved in the capital project, since we've been a part of the district. So on the capital project side, we're in a good place.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, I'm still hesitating, but yes. And the reason why I'm hesitating is because I know that we have the budget season coming up. I know that we have getting ready for the summer, which is the highest risk for the construction project, right? That's why we want to keep some of that contingency money. So wherever we can lower the risk as a district, even if it's a couple of hours of that information, that experience, if it's needed, I think that we should consider and take advantage of it, right? That's my main takeaway, is because, and this is with any construction project, whenever you remove a key stakeholder that has been part of it from the very beginning, right when we're about to get into the most complicated part of the construction piece, there's usually some loss that always turns into coordination issues, schedule, and cost. So whatever we can avoid, and if we can keep open-minded about that, that's mainly what I'm asking for, if possible.
Absolutely. And at the February 2nd meeting, Madeline and the board, we will have a proposal in front of the board for a transition and for fulfilling all of the responsibilities going forward. So a lot of behind the scenes transitioning is happening, and certainly, again, we'll take a closer look, but Michael is willing. So certainly we may be able to approve some time, some consultation time, where maybe 2 months down the road we run into a situation where we need history, and we could reach out to Michael. He is certainly willing. So
he's been incredibly dedicated to the district, and I am sure I know he wishes to enjoy his retirement, and he has many grand plans. But hopefully he will take a break from mountain biking and kayaking and golfing to come back to us for a few hours and at least tell us the stories of his adventures while he's also helping us out if need be.
Sure.
Okay, do I have any other questions or comments on the consent agenda as presented? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Great. Moving on to new business, we have CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approve the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and the Committee on Preschool Special Education, CPSE, recommendations and student placements 17528. May I have a motion, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Thank you. Next, we have a request for approval of Memorandum of Agreement with the Garrison Teachers Association. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, does hereby approve the Memorandum of Agreement between the Garrison Union Free School District and the Garrison Teachers Association, dated January 19, 2022, and authorizes the superintendent to execute said agreement. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Carl, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. This is a recommendation to increase two rates, basically, that appear in our teacher's contract. One is for home instruction. The existing rate was $41 per hour for teachers to either do after-school instruction. It was also used for, in the past, for summer school instruction. Joe and I have been planning with the American Rescue funding to run after-school programs this spring as well as a summer program, and 41 an hour really is very low. So this is a recommendation to increase that rate to 55 an hour. I can tell you our certified teachers could easily command 100, 125 an hour for tutoring at any time. So I think increasing it to 55 is fair. This is ahead of a negotiation, so it's a bit unusual, but I think it's the right thing to do, at least start increasing it and make it a bit more competitive. Same thing with the after-hours rate. Currently, it's $32 an hour. This is for example, Nurse Melissa, who many of us know. She works on holidays. On New Year's Eve, she was making calls to families. She never refuses anytime there is an emergency and she needs to work. She's willing. I thought 32 an hour was really low to be working on vacations and holidays or weekends. So I'm recommending that 32 an hour does go up to 45 an hour, and that primarily the use is for Melissa. Very few staff members access that after-hour rate. So it's two rate increases, and I hope you will consider them. Any questions?
Okay, then let's go ahead and move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay, we have returned to public comment once again. I'm not going to read my paragraph again. Hopefully you recall it from before. If anyone wishes to speak, the podium is available. Okay, thank you all. I'm going to move on then to board member comment. I'll begin with Jocelyn.
Sorry, I know we're almost done, but I did want to just give a comment on Sunday evening. There was an event that Desmond Fish hosted. It was a virtual event with a mediation specialist named Tajay Gaynor. And because of our ongoing partnership that Carl works on and that many people work on with Desmond Fish, they invited me to attend the virtual event and work with Tajay, who I knew from last year, and also Eric Brown, who some of you may know, who's a board trustee at the library, Haldane parent, chair of their DEI, Haldane PTA committee. Anyway, so it was a really interesting conversation. The name of the talk was On Mediation, Creating Bonds of Tranquility in a World That Often Thrives on Calamity. If you know Eric, you would understand that he probably made that title. it's a great one. Anyway, I wanted to just say two things that Tajay brought up. So he's a professional mediator. He's really great. He has worked with our community before. And I, being there, was able to ask, or there was some questions related to schools. So he had a couple things to say that I thought was worth bringing up. One of them was, someone from the audience had a question on political violence and how to deal with it, right? How do we as a community address the types of violence that we're seeing, not just gun related, but obviously even social, political, and economic. And what he said regarding that is, I think we can't act like the things that underlie the political violence aren't tied to racism, systemic racism in this country. It's tied directly to it. We need seriously in this country to grapple with the impacts of our history, and not just our history, because there's so much of it that still rings true. End quote. So I just want to bring it up because I think the work we're doing with the DEI committee that we all helped establish is helping to address some of the issues that Tajay, as an expert in these fields, really brings it all back to, like, we have to address racism. I know you were part of it too. Like, this is an important part of our dialogue, and we know that schools are grappling with it as we unfurl different types of curricula and as we expand our teachings on history. So I think I wanted to just bring up that he really wanted to focus on that. And one other thing was a quote on schools and like what he thought the schools' roles were. He said this quote, "I'm a strong believer that every school needs to have not just mediation programs for young people, but that they implement restorative practices, not just in their code of conduct or policy guidelines, but to address the incidents that also happen in the larger community. Whatever happens in the community trickles into the schools. Trust and believe that. And helping bring people together to address these incidents is one of the major responsibilities that schools should take on." And so I bring that up to just encourage us to continue to reach out and branch out with our community partners like Desmond Fish and others, and be sure that we bring some of these larger conversations that are happening broadly around the nation, the state, the community, to our students, to our classrooms. Because according to Tajay's advice, like this is one of the most important spaces where we can create safety, like a safe space for people to really address it. And so I encourage us to continue to try to build that in as we continue to move on this kind of work. There's so much more I could say, but I won't. I think it's recorded. You can watch it online just to hear more of what Tajay said. But that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up, David.
Yeah, we should probably create an opportunity for us to talk more about what you just said. So at your suggestion, I wrote to, this is a separate matter, I wrote to Allison to ask her how she would feel about, on a rotating basis, each board member adding a paragraph or two to her newsletter, her weekly newsletter. And she wrote back and she totally loves the idea. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think it'd be fun to have some direct communication with our community. And she welcomes it as part of her newsletter. So anybody have any thoughts about that?
The only thing I will say is that we only have a voice as a group of 7. We don't have individual voices as a school board. So creating that message, we would have to be very careful that it is a message of consensus every time. And it is not one member speaking out on something that they feel strongly about, because there isn't a room for that within the construct of school board. It is about consensus and the 7 of us coming together as a group. So if we choose to do that, we would just have to look at how we structure creating that message going forward.
So we would want to submit the paragraph or two to board members before submitting it to Allison then, right?
Yes, and maybe, and in a public forum, talk about what it is we are going to talk about in that, because this is also the place where we can present those ideas.
Can't we report in the newsletter, say, on what we talked about tonight, where we have an audience of 3, and maybe some people will watch the filming of it. But what I mean is, it's a way to just enhance our community to understand what goes on.
What's going on?
Yeah,
like
so
a summary, like somebody writing up
in a
a
sense.
summary of the meeting.
Or
that
maybe
could be
even-
something we agree upon to do. If we reach consensus on the idea of writing a summary and including
I think
that.
the consensus exists before we write the thing.
Exactly, so
Yeah.
that something doesn't appear that does not have the consensus of the full board behind it in writing.
Yeah.
But it is definitely something we can do, we just need to, it's gonna take some planning, so. On that note, we would need to then have consensus that we want to pursue that idea. So why don't I put that on an agenda going forward, and we'll continue to talk about how that is. And if you have specific ideas prior to a discussion on it, such as a summary of the meeting, let's put those all together so that we know what we're talking about.
I mean, to
before
me,
we-
that's pretty much what we would report on, is just making sure people in our community knew what was discussed without having to make them go watch a 2-hour video, just like highlights or something. That was my original thinking,
That makes sense to me.
It may be pretty boring, actually, but it could not be, right? Because we can comment on the presentations we have, and it doesn't have to be about like discussion. It just could be another way for the parents and caregivers to get a sense of what goes on.
I forget, do we tag these videos so that you can skip to different topics?
I don't know.
Like, is there a way to, this is probably asking them, is there a way to attach the agenda to the recording so that you could say, I want to watch the discussion about the communication plan or the branding, I want to watch this one, so you can skip through no offense, some of the less interesting stuff that we generally go through?
It's all really exciting, but okay. Yes, I hear your point. It's doable? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part. You can do it, or
Looking at,
you can look into? Okay. Well, then it sounds like we'll get follow-up on that as well as tagging it. Maybe if you could let Dusty know if that is possible, and Dusty just let the rest of the board know. And then if there are other thoughts for your idea of putting a couple paragraphs in, I'll add it to the next agenda.
If you could tag it, that would make putting a paragraph in much more attainable and easier for a parent to actually click into what they want to see. So if you said, the board talked about these 5 things, and if they were all hyperlinked directly into the YouTube video where it's being discussed, versus having to open it up and then scroll, and we all have done that and lost interest immediately. So just an idea. It's probably a way to make it less laborious to write a summary of the meeting as well. I mean, you could just put bullet points. These are the 5 topics we discussed, and if you can link people directly into it, it might be a way to do it that's less,
More like pulling from the agenda is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And then with the hyperlink.
It's an idea. I don't know what the process of writing a summary is going to be, so.
That's great, and then that avoids the idea of, like,
There's no
commentary.
editorialism,
Commentary,
yeah.
Yeah, it gets rid of the, exactly. Okay. We'll figure that out and then add it again to the agenda. So if there are other ideas, please let me know too. Anything else? You're good? Thank you, David. Madeline?
So thank you, Jocelyn. I did listen to that on, was it Sunday? It's really interesting. Thank you so much. Highly recommended. I did have a question unrelated about the forest. I think a couple of months ago, we were talking about what we needed to do more, I guess, use the forest more. And there was talk about a toilet, and there was a lot of work put into that. So I don't know, was that, did it work out? Is it submitted? Are we not doing it? Any update?
That's something that we're still working on. I think the next step for me is to see if there's any architectural requirements of things that I have to do to put it in place. But yes, it is still something that we're looking at doing.
And the cost would probably be needed fold into next year's budget as well. So it'd be part of the budget discussions as well that would be upcoming.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Courtney, Kent?
I just wanted to point out and thank Carl, Allison, the entire faculty for the hard work since the start of the new year. I mean, I think we all entered into early January with a lot of trepidation again about Omicron and whether schools would have to go out. You guys really have juggled it well. Everybody's working so hard, and you've provided our children again with really the ability to learn in person without interruption, even with the chaos going on all around us. So just wanted to commend you guys again for your hard work and tell you how much we appreciate you and your entire staff's work.
Thank you, Kevin. Much appreciated.
Matt?
Just want to second that comment and no other comment. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Just briefly, I will say that if any of you have questions or things you want to discuss, please let me know, at some point, and we can start working on getting those added to the agenda prior to the meeting. I do take notes, but anything else too. And also just a note, we had previously scheduled a joint meeting with our high school district, O'Neill, for tomorrow. We are postponing that for a time when we can have a tour of the facility. And of course, we do love learning about their programs and things, but as you guys have pointed out, both districts have been very focused on keeping the doors open, really getting through this wave of Omicron. So we're looking for a new date on that, and I will keep everyone updated as to when that will be. And hopefully we'll get over to see their new facilities as well and see the results of their capital project. I know many of our 8th grade families have had the luxury of going over, but the board has not yet. So that's all I've got. So I think we're ready to move on unless there's any further comment, questions from members. Okay. We do not have an executive session tonight, and that brings us to adjournment. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby adjourns the meeting of January 19th, 2022. May I have a motion, please? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay, awesome. Thank you all.